This is the first layer and we will do a wet on wet. I'm glazing my petal first with a layer of water, a thin glaze of water, and on top of it I will put light pink color. I have my reference image right in front of me and I have also opened my image on a mobile. You can use a larger device to look at your flowers because we will be going accordingly. So the first layer is wet on wet. Put a glaze of water and a very pale pink color on your petal. Now I just added a little bit of violet. I added violet because I wanted to add some darker colors in the corner. If you don't have violet, you can also use blue. Any blue will help. Just make it a point to use a lighter value first. I'm wetting down my petal again with water. And putting in a pale mix of pink color. The reason I chose another second petal to wet down from quite a lot of distance from my first petal is because I don't want to paint close by and forget that okay, the previous petal was just painted. If I forget it, I have the risk of spoiling my first petal because the colors from the wet on wet on the second petal can merge with the first one. I do not want that for this African daisy flower. So here again, having applied a layer of water, I am applying the light pink color. Now I am looking at the reference and my reference is showing me that it is relatively dark here. So this is a pretty simple flower, so you can draw it also if you do not have access to a printer right now. I had one, so I got it printed, but try to get a printout as soon as possible, a colored one. Additionally, open your flower on a device also because you can enlarge a particular area and look at the colors that we need to fill in. Here I am lifting little bit of color because on the image which I am looking at on my mobile, you can use any Photoshop or Canva to upload your image and expand it so that you can look at the details better. So I'm looking at the details and that's why I lifted little bit of color. Here now I'm adding my violetish color, very watered down. There's a lot less water on my paper, But since I want the lines to be merged and look blurry, am I not doing a wet on dry? You can do a wet on dry as well, but then we need to soften the boundaries because these are thin lines. I soaked up a lot of water and lifted some color previously, as you saw, and then when the paper is still wet, I'm going on with a thinner brush in order to create these small streaks as I see on my reference image. This is how we'll go about doing the other petals also. But when we go to the next petal, we will need to water it down with a very thin glaze of water because I don't want to create hard line edges right away. We will do that also, but later on when there is some more when the petals take more better shape. So just the way I'm doing it now and the way which is what I described, this is how I will go about doing the entire petal. I will not try to do any petal which is wet, another petal which is wet close to a petal which is already drying, so that I don't have a chance of mixing one color into another. And because I want softer lines, having lifted some color off a petal, when it is still wet, did I go and add few more lines to it according to the reference image. In my third petal, I am doing wet on wet again, thin glaze of water with a pale pink. Do not allow any puddles to form. If you see any puddles forming anywhere, just dry your brush on a tissue paper and soak up that water. On our third petal, again doing a wet on wet with pale pink. And towards the center, where the petal is converging, I am using a pale violetish color. If you can use blue also. Because there is very less water on my petal, so I am drawing out the lines with my violetish color. Here I don't want the color to clog up in one area, that's why I just spread it where it is converging. Spreading the color. My petal is still damp. So which one should we do next? Okay, this. Yeah, This is another method which I am showing how to create a blurred edge. So we first put in our color, and with water or some other color, we just move our brush on the edge of the previous line. So while there's a hard edge on the other side of this petal, the petal side of this petal will have a softer edge, which we are coloring. Now I'm just going in with little bit of water. The hard edge, as you see, has gotten removed. It's wetting down with water, clear water, and putting in lines which will create soft transitions. If you want to leave any area as a highlighted area, do not put in colors over there directly. You can drag your colors to that place if you want. Wherever you see a darker area, you can put your colors over there the first when you place it, because eventually that area needs to go darker, so it's better to place your color over there first. I'm creating in streaks of lines, wet on wet, so it is looking relatively blurry, but we will darken it. Once this layer dries, then we will put in another layer by again wetting down the entire petal and then redoing this mapping. This is the first stage where we are mapping each of the petals, and we will follow accordingly when we do our next steps. These lines, when created when your petal is damp, will not allow it to form any hard edge. In case you have already made a hard edge on dry paper, you can soften it by the method which I just showed, the previous one, where you soften one side of the edge. So this is how we will go on the entire flower. And once the entire flower is done, we'll have to do it 1 or 2 more times depending on how dark we need it. I'm still working on this petal because it is a moist weather condition right now, and I can work on it. Because the weather is moist, the paper is moist as well. It has not dried out quickly. I am looking at my reference image so that I go dark only at places where I need to go dark. Just like we are doing this, all the petals will be done, and then once all of them dry out, we will have to redo these petals to darken it, because once we add the background, the flower can look lighter. So the paper and the petal being moist, the petal particularly being moist at this stage, is allowing me to mark my lines and have a soft edge. Again wetting down my paper for a wet on wet first layer of pale wash, and then we'll go in. Even in the first layer you can apply different colors. Where we need to apply pale pink, we'll apply pale pink. If we need to apply relatively darker pink, then at that place where you see, you will have to apply one or two shades darker than the previous. I'm starting with a shadow color there, and I'm starting with this central area. That is petal closer to the center. Drawing out faint lines on the wet petal. You see, it's coming up gradually. This is the third line I'm making on my petal. And once I'm done with making all the lines, I'll allow it to dry, or I'll come up the next day so that, and while I can do the rest of the petals on the other side as well. So I think you must have understood how we are going about doing this. If you have any questions, you can ask me. Now here I've putting in a darker line. How I did it is that the consistency which I'm using here is thicker than the previous consistency. Previous one was very much watered down. This is not as much watered down. So when you put your thicker consistency on a damp paper, it will not spread easily because the consistency of water is thick and the amount of water is less on your petal. Nevertheless, you will get soft edges, which is what we are looking at right now. Entire petal is wet or damp right now, little less than completely wet, it's damp. And because the consistency of water paint is thicker, it will not spread erratically anywhere. It will just be where you have laid down your brush stroke. We have two reasons for this. The consistency is thicker of the paint and water, and there is relatively less water on the petal, which will give you these fine lines with blurred edges on both sides. So this is how we go about doing the entire flower. I'll finish the entire flower and upload a photo also. You can do the same, and in case you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.